All right. And then the second thing was, would it make sense to, there's so many things here. Does it make sense to like start with like a, here's what each of the things are supposed to do to like give you both an overview, and then maybe we ask questions from there? Or do you want to start with questions? Like, how do you want to approach this one?
Maybe the first one.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to walk it through with a screen share because I think it'll be easier to like do it this way. So the big one is automatically merge when merge checks pass. So this is sort of the total feature. And the background for this is that right now, in order to get a merge button that you can press, you have to get to a state where the only thing left required on a merge request is that the pipeline is like running or has run, right? If you require approvals, you can't hit a merge button. If there's draft discussions, you can't hit a merge button, all of those sort of things. And so the goal is to flip this sort of completely and allow you to hit a merge button at any point in time. And then when all of the conditions are satisfied, it will merge. And so that's what this epic is for. That is for like, this is for basically all of the big backend work that we need to do. And it builds on the work that Grant's team did with adding in approvals as part of that, right? Grant's team made it so that you could hit the merge button if approvals were still needed. And so this builds on this to add all of those other checks and doesn't really impact anything else in the UI, because the UI work that they did sort of encompasses that like piece. It sort of shows what's going on. The other piece of this that we're doing as part of this, because this is a confusing change, is this epic, which is called the front end merge widget updates. And this is really, oh, I see why this is also confusing because the arrows point to the bottom. This is less about this piece at the bottom, although, because I think we've agreed that this is covered off. And it's more about this top part, which is now, because the merge request could be set to merge whenever, we need to show all of the reasons to a user. And today, the way that works in the merge widget is we only show like one check at a time, right? Like if you have draft discussions, like that's the only thing we show you in the widget. We're like, you can't merge it because of draft discussions. And then if you resolve all the discussions, it'll be like, oh, you can't merge it because you're missing.
Do you mean draft discussions or do you mean unresolved discussions?
Or unresolved discussions. Sorry. Yeah. We'll show you like that next, right? Like, so we show you this one at a time thing, which is really hard for you to like get through and figure out what all the conditions are. And because we're shifting to a model where it'll merge when all the conditions are met, we now need to show you all of those conditions. And so that's what this work is to do, is for, and this is both backend and front end, right? For the backend to return all of the reasons it's not being merged so that the front end can display in a widget like this that's collapsible all of the reasons that it can't be merged yet. And then as things are merged, or as things are accomplished, like as the discussions are resolved or as an approval is given, right, those checks would fall off and it would say like merge blocked, there's 2 checks left or whatever the case is. And so that's what this side of the work is. So it's 2 things, right? There's the big backend piece to just sort of keep adding in checks for the first part that the license compliance team did. And then there's this other part, which is we need to show all of these things at once for the front end to be able to consume it so that they can display all of these things. I'll stop there and hope that makes sense and clarifies sort of the 2 different things, because I think it is 2 highly related but slightly separate things. And so I want to make sure that that's clear. So I don't know, maybe Mark and Andre, you can go now.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to me. And the merge, starting off with the merge checks returning from the backend. I don't think that's going to be so hard. If you give that to me the next release, that can be done. And also the moving on to the next thing, which is the automatically merge when merge checks. So yeah, Martin, I believe, did the first thing for the approvals. And when I was doing the second check for the drafts, I was asking for the front end help. And yeah, that's when the discussion came up, when it was like, this is a bit having all this in the front end when we have it in the back end already. Yeah, so I guess we have two options there, is that we can yeah, I would have to have a look how much work that would be to put that in the back end. I don't think so much, maybe like 2 or 3. If we want to refactor before or after the changes, if that makes sense, if that question makes sense. Because at the moment we have in the front end, we have a big if statement, if blah, 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 if blah, 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 blah. We could do the continue as we are and add onto the if statement. And then after the change then we can do the refactor, or we can do the refactor before. It just depends on how critical the merge when ready work is, I would say. Yeah, so my first question would be, how critical is the merge when ready work? And then secondly, we talked about, can we dog food the current approvals work, merge when approvals given work? And I believe we can. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to dog food this. Yeah.
Okay, let me answer the criticalness. So they're sort of related, the dog fooding. So the dog fooding piece is, right, the functionality that Martin built, they want to turn on for a handful of projects, right? Because they need to show internal progress for how this process works for license compliance without disrupting GitLab's flow, right? Because of the way license compliance works, like that's like the last job that runs for the GitLab project in particular, in like a nearly hour-long pipeline. And so you could click merge when pipeline succeeds, and then the whole pipeline will go, and then it'll be like, oh, you require an approval, and then it'll kick it back out, right? Like, and so that's why they want to turn this on. So the point about dogfooding was like, we have all this other work we need to do, right? Which is add the other checks, add the new widget design. What I don't want to do is add additional checks to the work that's on, because that confuses and complicates like how people understand that internally, right? Like if one day you click the button and it's like,
yeah,
I clicked auto merge and it was waiting on approvals and pipeline succeeds, and then the next time you click it, it's like 3 checks. It's like a different, it is like over time, that's very confusing to users. And so that's what I've told Grant and his team too, is like, I'm not willing to like globally turn this on until all the checks are there, because I don't want to have to explain to users like, oh, well, these 3 checks work with auto merge and these 3 checks don't. And like tomorrow 4 checks will work, and maybe we have to turn one of the other ones off for some reason, right? Like I don't want to deal with that. And so that was the point about like making sure we segment, like isolate the feature flag code paths enough that like we can keep adding checks on another different global feature flag while letting them leave the one turned on that they have today.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay.
And I think, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was no, it's all good.
Okay. And then on an importance, right? They want to get this on globally quickly, but we are blocking that with, we want all of the checks done. And so that's sort of like how we need to think about important. Like we need to be good partners to the threat insights team or the license compliance team. Actually, don't know. In terms of not like blocking their work forever because we're going to do a whole bunch of things and it's going to take us 6 milestones. Like I think the last time I spoke to Grant, it was like, based on where we were 2 or 3 weeks ago, it seemed like 16.5, 16.6 were reasonable. I don't know if that's still the case, but we just need to be able to communicate and say like, look, here's the plan, here's where we're at, and like, here's what's going on. And so it's important. This will be something that is planned for in every milestone until it is delivered, and like however much capacity that is. Like we just need to figure out sort of all of the issues that go into that and what that is. So it is a priority in the sense that we're holding up sort of another group's work. If that makes sense. So they can't deliver that value to users until we finish everything.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the refactor for doing the auto merge, I think would probably be another 2 or 3. And then we'll need to probably make the change on the front end with that tool. It's probably like a 1 or a 2, probably not so much. But
So Mark, can you go? So what
in
terms of front end change and refactor, what exactly are we talking about? Because you're right. You already have a bunch of checks in the chain of ifs, but that essentially is only to decide what widget to show, what sub widget kind of thing to show. And this is kind of like we already have one that is like has merge checks failed and the auto merge is not enabled. So this would be probably the opposite. So we are leveraging a bunch of like specific properties on the response, but our goal is to merge everything up into detailed merge status. Like that was the like single source of truth state flag kind of thing that we worked on. And if we had a preference, that would be it, like to update that to account for this new state, because then we can update the front end to reflect what it needs to be reflected. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, right. You're talking about being able to basically remove, maybe not fully remove, but like remove a lot of these if statement checks and rely on the backend to tell us, hey, is it auto mergeable or not? Is that right?
I'm not so sure if we can remove them. I would have to go and check specifically each
but
one.
To like less logic or so.
Yeah, but honestly, what I really want to fully understand is like whenever you add another check, the front end doesn't need to know. The front end, all the front end needs to know is, listen, it failed some merge checks, which I think we already have has merge checks failed. So we already have a property for that. It makes me wonder whether that's already in place that we can use, or adding new checks still needs to be wired into a particular property. But for example, when I look at that if and at the series of ifs, I'm not sure if I'm updated, but it should be pretty fresh. We have a couple of checks in that chain that are already looking for the detailed merge status, but then others are checking in the a more generic property. Ideally, we'd move whatever number of ifs into a detailed merge check, a detailed merge status. And this one that I was mentioning here has merge checks failed and not auto merged enabled. This seems particularly related, but this is only part of the work. The other part is pretty clear, like getting a list of checks that failed. We have that planned out. There's a new issue for backend, a new issue for front end. That's sorted. What wasn't so well sorted is what sort of adaptation does the front end need to do as the backend keeps adding checks to the auto merge checks. That's the only question that we currently have.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then I guess my question would be: are we wanting to have the, because if you maybe I can share my screen. One moment.
Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, it might be easier. Thank you. Because here we have like on line 19, if has merge checks failed and not auto merged. And not so we have sorry, wrong line. I mentioned the wrong line, sorry. If you go back.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's my fault. On line 29, we have auto merge enabled on line 29, and we'll have like not merge error, return state auto merge enabled. Are you wanting to have like to be able to not merge error there, or?
I think merge error is a different thing. I think merge error is when
merge error is
there
when you
was occurred an error. I think
when you try to rebase.
if anything, we need a auto merge enabled and has merge checks failed. Now that my question is, maybe we already have these. If you're, for example, the way you're adding the draft check, if that affects these properties, sorry, if that affects this property, I don't know if this is a backend method. I don't think it is. It's not. I think it's something that we create on the fly.
Also, while you're
Yeah.
like looking under, I sent an issue in chat, and I wish Phil was here because I had pinged Phil. The pipeline team is also asking to have the front end remove all of the logic. In the issue that I sent you, because it's confusing. So I wonder if like that sort of aligns with what Mark is talking about, and maybe Mark, it would be helpful for you to look at this issue too, sort of for what they're asking. And Phil did respond this morning, but I wonder if like, yeah, that would make sense. Maybe we do need to do this work that we're asking for about simplifying where this logic is controlled, and it's sort of like because of auto merge, we probably need to take into account whatever the pipeline team has going on too, and like do all of that there. And so maybe that's the work. I don't know. I just want to make sure that we're it feels very much related to what you're both sort of asking for here, is like the simplification of where state is managed, because the pipeline team has like 4 of these states that they're dealing with too.
Yeah, it definitely looks related.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm still not too sure on how we can progress the current adding of new auto merge attributes also.
Are you saying,
because
not sure how to progress adding like additional checks without doing this front end sort of refactor as
into
well?
the back end? Yeah, I guess my question is, do we want to do the refactor first or after as well? Because if we want to enable the feature faster, it's probably better to do the refactor after. I'm just not too sure how much messier will be.
I guess that's it. If we don't do the refactor, you're saying it would be harder to implement all these checks now, or it'll put more load on the front end in terms of needing more if else's.
Or like, I believe so. Like there'll be slightly more, as far as my understanding at least, there'll be slightly more state checking, most likely in that if statement.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the implementation of the has merge checks failed getter that we have on the front end, and essentially just like re-implementing the logic of doing like has approvals available and there's approvals left, and preferred auto merge is this, then we do that. If not, we do. So all of this could be implemented on the back end, and if it is, that will give us the ability to confidently update the state check on the state key to leverage that property with the backend implementation. Right now, what we have here is sort of like a front end fallacy. It's us trying to re-implement those checks. So if we can get that from the backend, I think that would be it allows us to, hey, we have the auto merge enabled, and there's some merge checks that failed with the updated logic as you go adding new checks. Because right now, you're correct. Like the way this is wired right now, we would have to go into that, wherever that is, and update here the list of things we're checking, which could potentially not match. And again, this was probably make sense before we had the WebSockets. Like these days, if we update something, like we make the merge request not a draft, we make it ready, we send it to the backend, the checks are immediately updated. So we should get an update from the backend through the WebSocket. So it's pretty immediate. So today, I think it would make more sense to have, well, we're in a much better place to have all of this implemented on the backend. And this way, we have one single source of truth for like the state. We simplify the front end logic, and then eventually we can get closer to what the pipelines team is wanting. But
so it sounds like I think you're both in different ways saying we should do the refactor first, because the front end logic is going to get more complicated and the back end doesn't really even know what to give you, because the front end logic is going to continue to get more complicated each time we had a check. So it sounds like we should do the refactor first, and that will slow us down on getting to auto merge, but it gets us in a place where we can potentially move, that work will move faster because the refactor is done. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think to move just has merged checks failed, the one that I had just shown us, it won't be so hard as well. I had envisioned it to be a bit more refactory, but to move that, if that's what we need to do from the backend, that would be fine, I think, to do.
Yeah, I think there's some variations depending on EE or CE. Because approvals is only in EE and stuff. So we have to account for that. But other than that, I think that would give us, I need to validate this with Phil.
Yeah.
But I feel like that will definitely get us to a place, because that's the thing we need. Like we need to have something telling us that the merge request has failed. Sorry, the merge checks have failed, and then a way to get which checks did fail. And that's a separate query that we can do. My biggest question right now is whether we want has merge checks failed, or some merge checks failed, or do we just make this implementation into the detailed merge status? That's the biggest question on my mind. Like, where does the refactor go to? Is it a new property, or is it the one that exists right now? It just affects this single source of truth of the state that it's in, and it's just a new updated state for that. That's the biggest question right now in my mind.
I think I prefer a new attribute.
Why? We're trying. So you understand my why? I'm not being facetious. It's just that we were trying to avoid us
having the same
fragmentation of properties, to have it all boiled down to one property and give us like a single source of truth of the state in the backend. And if we keep adding more properties, then we'll go back to where we were before, starting to unify them into one state. So that's where my head is at.
Because detail merge status is only going to return the failed status.
I don't need to know which ones.
You don't need to know which ones, but you do need to know which ones.
Not there. That's the thing. So
we need to know.
The thing is, that flag will tell me, oh, there's some checks that failed. Let me go and figure out which ones. Of course, I need a separate property to list them, but I still need a flag to help me determine the state that I'm in. So essentially, the detailed merge status could just have a new state, which would be auto merge checks failed, something. That's it. And then what the front end will do is, all right, if that's present, if that's the state, I'll go and get the list of checks that failed here. It could come on the subscription or not, but to me, I feel like we still need that status updated so that we can reshuffle the widgets and just use the right widget that we need without having to have the front end. And that's why so here, when we have these are really straightforward. These ones here, we have to have, this getter is doing multiple checks on the front end. I don't know. I don't even know about this one. No, that's the back end. Yeah, that's a backend. So, but this one is a front end. That's what we need is like the detailed merge status. I'll have to check which place we would be in the order of all this. It's probably higher up to be like, all right, we have the auto merge enabled, and there are some checks that failed consistently with the checks that we were writing on the back end. And
but the problem is, has checks failed isn't is taking into account auto merge, right? As well. The has checks failed is taking into account is it auto mergeable, which is fine. But my to use detailed merge status though, I don't see how we could do it because yeah, if you're able to go back to the if statement, it returns like the backend is giving the front end information about what has failed with the status. So on line 21, on line 23, on line 25, on line 32, 33. That's how you know which certain things failed through this detailed merge status attribute. So I'm not sure how we would like, it's not possible, I don't think, to add a new has merged checks failed, because then you wouldn't have access to this information anymore on the detailed merge status. I think I know what you mean. No, I know what you mean is that by adding a new attribute, we're just doing the same thing. Right?
So, but I'm trying to see if I'm reading this correctly. So the detailed merge status is one answer, right? What this is doing is comparing with the list of constants that we have on the front end to check Samus pass. So, but the response is still just one word,
Correct.
just one
Yeah.
constant thing.
So that's it. The detailed merge status at the moment is going to be returning what has failed, only one thing.
Yeah, the one that has failed. Yeah.
The one that's failed. I think we can do refactor when we do the returning all the attributes. I think that's
okay. Okay.
that,
so
it probably makes more sense when we return the list of failures, because that's going to change the front end logic again, right? When we return a list of failures.
So the way we thought about the list of failures is it would be a pretty simple list of failures without. So that list of failures would just be used for informing the user, because the front end, this is a good point, because the front end at that moment when it's displaying the error, they only need to know is like, what do I need to tell the user? Just list me the checks that failed. Here, for these ones here, is when we don't have auto merge enabled and we go state by state. So we show the draft widget. Kai, if the auto merge is not enabled, do we want to change the way the widgets are shown?
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically just a flip on its head.
Okay. Right. Which widget are you talking about? I guess let me make sure.
So the draft widget, for example. Draft.
Do we want to show like the merge widget that says n number of checks failed and show all of the checks?
Sorry.
Is that what you're asking? Do we want to show here, let me share. Let me do this. Take this.
Yeah.
Do this. If auto merge is not enabled, do we want to show this widget where it would show merge blocked, X checks failed, and then a list of all the checks? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes. This should be the new widget design either way.
So it will replace all the other intermediate widgets that we have.
Yeah. Because we'll only have one that will show all of the checks. So we would want this either way. Does that help? Hurt?
It does. I'm just trying to see. I'm trying to see what information we lose. That's my biggest question, because, for example, pipeline fail view. So we have a couple of widgets that are shown in specific moments, I don't think we have a lot of information in those. For example, the pipeline failed one doesn't have a lot of information. It's just like, yeah, pipeline must succeed, or something to fix or something.
I think draft has one, right?
Yeah,
The
draft has one
one.
too.
Draft has a
Like,
thing that you like click a button to ready it. The
Yeah.
thread one has some additional controls to like jump to threads or resolve threads in an issue. But I think like that content would then move in to like the expand menu, right? Like you would put that in the expand menu.
Um,
Does that make sense?
okay, it does. But essentially, we're changing for that list, and then eventually want to make that list smarter to have actions to each one of the rows, kind of thing.
I don't actually care if the actions are there sort of immediately. I don't think I might change my mind when you do that, but like I actually don't know. No, I care. I care if those actions are gone. That'd be a regression.
Yeah, that's the thing, because if we do that, so if we do that for all conditions and we start like showing the list of checks, but then we stop showing the actual widget, then we need to be more careful about what are we not showing anymore. I think we need a deeper analysis here, but essentially, because I was looking at this from the perspective of if they have the auto merge enabled, they've already clicked on it, and now it's just a matter of having those conditions be fulfilled and it will auto merge. If you only updated that path, it's much safer because the other ones haven't changed, and then progressively we can update them as we go. So basically what we're talking about here is probably come up with a plan for rollout of this in a way that we can get to where we need to be and then eventually not lose information.
Could you know that massive if statement? Could we just not move that to the back end as well? So instead of reusing detail merge status, we could just introduce a new attribute, which is basically just this if statement.
I think if you implement all the other checks we're doing that are not using detail merge status, that would essentially be all right. Now we just leverage the detailed merge status.
That would, yeah.
Please don't make this report public. Okay.
It'd still be in one
so as you can see, a couple of. Oh wait, are you seeing my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some of these are not directly from the detail merge status.
Right.
So if all these that are not directly, they are starting to be accounted for on the detail merge status, yeah, this could be totally implemented on the back end, and then we could just detect that and just blindly follow what the back end is telling us.
Yeah. So instead of having like, I mean, I'd have to have a look at how much work it would be, but like instead of having the, I don't know, could you, was it possible to share screen? Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't notice you were reading. Sorry.
That's so good. I was trying to draw on your screen. Can you see the blue? Instead of having like these if has merged checks failed and auto merged, blah, 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 you would just have, for example, if merge checks failed. And that attribute would be, I don't know, you'd have this dot new attribute equals attribute dot merge checks failed, state key merge checks failed, or something like this. I don't know. You don't need an if statement even. You could just do it directly, you know. But if we move this whole if statement to the back end, I think it would be, and put a new attribute in here, and I think it might be make this easier. And I think it would solve the issue of the auto merge stuff too, huh? I think.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm trying to think what do we lose with that, because this is from a time where we didn't have real time. So I think if we rely on that part of real time, because the point of this is when the front end changes something on the when the user changes something on the front end, immediately the widgets would react. So, and that is a good thing. But if the reaction to the action comes down to the WebSockets, it should be negligible, I think, the update. So I think it should be safe to do that. To move all of those checks that are not there to the detailed merge status. I'm just wondering if we have to, right, to get to where we need to be with the auto merge.
It feels no, we don't have to. We don't have to.
Right. So because I'm trying to think of if we want to do this, it's a major refactor of the merge widget state to not have individual states for each one of the checks failed and have one major component that lists all the checks that failed. Then eventually we can expand each section of it, which again, we might need to do that. We might need to have a little smarter list of checks that fail, because right now we were thinking about just having the strings. We might need to have some sort of like key to be able to detect what was the thing, so that then we, instead of having a full component to render the whole thing, we can update just that little row. Yeah, this is a deeper change than I was expecting, to be honest. So we need to think about this and discuss it to properly scope out and potentially get some things I'm not seeing. Should we move this into an issue to kind of like discuss exactly what's the best path ahead for deconstruct? And essentially is what you're asking with the pipeline team, is to simplify the state. That's the ask, I guess. Auto merge is just a detail, or we go for the auto merge. But I think we need to discuss how that would look like to be able to forecast the weight of that endeavor.
Yeah, I think moving this discussion into an issue is good. And then we can also get Phil's opinion here, and then I can, or it's easier to explain certain points, I think, as well, from my perspective, because then I can do a bit more research into it. But yeah, so I don't think we still have a way forward of the next step, or is the next step going to be go into the issue? Because currently we have the add draft check to automatic merge request, and I'm still not sure what we want to do with this merge request.
So that one is to add the draft check to the auto merge, period. And that's the first part that Kai was talking about if the only thing missing is the draft and they make it ready, the merge should happen. That's the backend implementation of it, which is separate from representing it to the front end. That shouldn't be blocked by this, I expect. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right. So the in the merge request, the backend part is done, I believe, or like, yeah. But there was some questions on the front end and making the changes on the front end as well.
Well, what if we decouple that? If we just like you take care of adding that draft check to the auto merge action, so they essentially just merging the merge request
to the backend, you're not.
So the backend just like merges if that's the last check that needed to be checked. And it doesn't tell the front end for now because it's behind a feature flag. And then in the meantime, we'll sort out the front end part, how we're going to be handling this updating of the UI, so to speak.
Okay, sounds reasonable. Sounds good. So I'm going to remove, to go forward with this merge request, and for the other checks, there's going to be no front end changes, no .js changes. I'll remove those. And since it's behind a feature flag, it's front end shouldn't even know about it.
And we'll start a discussion on how to properly update the handling of the state in a way that we can find a way forward for replacing all the widgets we have right now for individual states to use this list that we're going to be building the next milestone. Because maybe that's the first step, is to build that actual list. And then from that, we'll start updating the rest of the logic on the front end without you having to be blocked by adding those checks to the actual merge and the auto merge.
Yeah.
Make sense, Kai?
Sounds good.
I trust you both.
I don't think you should, but okay.
Yeah, no, nonsense.
Yeah, I'll run this by Phil. I have a one-on-one with him tomorrow, and we need to have an issue, I guess.
Should we
trying to think if it's a new issue or an epic, or maybe the epic is the best way to go about it. Essentially, is the epic to implement that issue that you showed us, which is simplifying. Not the ready. So here's the thing: that thing was just specifically about the ready to merge, because the ready to merge was really, really complicated.
Yeah, I think the issue from the pipeline folks is a piece of this. I think we need to do probably more than what they're asking. So I think the best course of action for us is let's create an epic. Let's add their issue to the epic. Let's get Phil to take a look. Run the plan by the pipeline folks as well, because there'll certainly be impact here, and make sure that everyone's on board. And then let's do what we need to do there. And then what I need also is like and I'm asking for this because we do have like OKR stuff tied to the widget that shows the checks version. So I think what would help me, and I'll ask Matt about this too, Andre, is it feels like there's maybe 3-ish work streams here. Right? There's this like refactoring of the widget logic. There's the actual widget updates to show the checks, to show all of the things. And then there's the all of the backend work for auto merge. So those are like the 3 work streams. It's not clear to me, and maybe it is to like the order of operations or what can be done in parallel, or sort of all of those things. And so that would also help me to understand like all of what we need to do. And you don't have to have an answer for that now. In fact, it would be better.
But I kind of do though, because if the third part of the backend doing the adding of the checks to the merge, it's behind a feature flag and it's separate from the front end, I think that in itself is work that is not blocked by the rest. Which is what I was telling Mark to go ahead and do. Just remove all the front end changes from his MR and go ahead and add the draft thing to the auto merge. And then you have a couple of other issues to add other checks. And that shouldn't be blocked by all the conversations we're having. Essentially, we might have to reroute the result of that to some other property or something. But I think that's separate. The other two are a little bit more intertwined. It all comes down to the question of UX, because I was thinking about this. If we're now showing all the list of the checks that failed, does it even make sense to show a specific state below? So merge blocked, here's the checks that failed. Then at the bottom, we have a big chunk saying your merge request is draft. Move it to whatever. Let's move it to ready. But I know that those are the checks that are failing. Why are you showing me the draft one? That's a UX problem, I guess. That if that doesn't make sense, then we need to make that jump. Or as soon as we have that list, we can implement that behind a feature flag as well. But we need to start talking about the first initial big chunk of work to replace all the current states with one major state, and then account for all that. And we need to make sure that we don't screw it up. Okay. Can you create the epic and tag me? And I can forward that to Phil and get him involved. Do you want me to do that?
I can create an epic, but I don't know what I would put in it. So you would have to like sort of fill everything out.
Okay. I'll try to do that by tomorrow, or I do it with Phil. But try to do that.
I'll give you 10 minutes now if you want to do it now, or you can.
Because we had a meeting. I can get something started. Yeah, if that's okay.
Okay, let's do that.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So going forward, I'm going to, for the current open merge request, remove the front end stuff. and then Yo will create an epic. And then for the approvals work, to dog food that, I think we have an issue somewhere. We can do that. I'm gonna create a new feature flag for the draft specific and the additional checks, so that every new check isn't going to be affecting the approvals, but
Okay.
we can turn the feature flag on.
Okay.
Cool.
Good.
Can you stop recording, Kai, for a second?